Hi everybody and welcome along to another Life Force Patterning Integral Health podcast with me, Ben Calder, coming all the way from sunny Shrewsbury in England. Thank you for listening in today. So today I'd like to just talk a little bit about the 5-element system in Chinese medicine, but specifically in relation to the emperor within that system, the heart. So we have a day coming up on this coming Sunday, the 18th, 19th of May, here in Shrewsbury. Because it's the start of summer here, we're moving into the 5-element practices for the fire element, for which summer is the season, quite rightly so. And I thought it'd be interesting to just do a little bit of discussion around the fire element, around the heart as an organ, both physically and subtly, emotionally, and just kind of explore that a little bit and what we're going to be covering with the LifeForce Qigong practices this coming Sunday. So it's kind of interesting that in 5-element theory, and certainly from the perspective of LifeForce Qigong, the 5-element system in its harmony with the Zhang and Fu organ system, this is the yin and yang organ system relationships, are the foundation of the harmony of our physiological and energetic well-being. So we're focusing on mainly the yin organs within our 5-element practices, and the yin organ for the fire element is really the heart. We could also look at the pericardium as well as being yin, but that doesn't really sit in the same way within the 5-element organ system because it's less of an organ and more of a function. Now, our connective tissue, our fascia, is made up of a large degree of water, 70% water or more, and it's water that mainly carries the messages of emotions throughout the body, and the fascia becomes the main physiological tissue for emotional expression. So one of the main factors in creating harmony in our lives is held within the emotional body, within all of these fluids. And each of these paired organs holds a positive and a negative emotional response. And if these emotions are held within the organs and not expressed, by suppressing or overly active and excessive behaviours, then pathologies can follow. And this is the nice thing about the 5-element work, is it's all about balance and harmony. Too much, even too much of the positive emotions, the joy, is an excess and can be scattering and disturbing to our energy. And also too much suppression is not a healthy aspect either. And each of the organs has a totally unique quality, a temperature, and an energetic response which influences specific tissues in the body along with the sense organs. One of our goals in LifeForce Qigong is to really try and bring harmony into emotional intelligence. And emotions can be mewed. I wonder if emotions can be mewed. That's a good question. But emotions can be viewed as energy in motion, which acts as a strong part of who we are as a human being. And when these energies become built up in areas of the body, they become stagnated in the connective tissue, in the fascia, and in the joints. And this can contribute towards pain in the body, psychological difficulties, pathologies in the organs, imbalances to our natural bioenergy, our qi, this constant kind of roller coaster process being up and down, and the body can be really craving certain behaviours, activities, substances to help rebalance itself. And we can also find mental deviations. Now again, from the perspective of LifeForce Qigong, we don't choose our feelings, although we can be present with them. And we don't solve emotional states, though we can allow them their right of creative expression. We can transform them, we can digest them, we can allow them to flow through us like rivers of life, gardening them on their way and allowing them to become something amazing for us. Emotions are carried in our body as energetic charges as well, and we often feel that, especially when there's a strong emotion. We get this sense, it can almost be like an electric shock, which, or something similar, which can be both a great thing, great joy, great happiness at seeing somebody that we haven't seen for a long time, or also kind of great hatred or arrogance, really strong stuff coming through. And these can be the process physically, through the subtle energetic movements in Qigong. So we're actually using the body to transform these emotions. And within the LifeForce Qigong 5 Element days that we practice here in Shrewsbury, part of what we're doing is that in the first part of the day we're physically trying to work with the areas around the heart. So we're doing some beautiful work within the shoulders, especially within the chest, within the upper body, to loosen all of the tissues, to help to create space and softness and mobility within the energies around the heart, the chest. And there's this beautiful relationship in Chinese medicine between the lungs and the heart. And the heart can be seen as a hot or a hotter organ or system within the body, and the lungs as a cooler system. So the lungs as well, because of this constant exchange that they have with the environment around them, are actually able to kind of cool down the excess heat of the heart. And so it's important that the lungs themselves as an energy are also working correctly so that they can do that regulation. So part of how we transcend and digest these emotions is including their wisdom into our personal evolution. And this is a process that can only happen when our awareness is really present within ourselves. And in our energetic bodies, we possess a level of personal protection that prevents us from feeling too much when we don't have a sufficient support system or personal power to manage or cope with any of these emotions. And this is our denial system, and this can also be where we move things into our unconscious, put them into shadow, project them out to others. And when we don't have that energy, we can go into denial and build up a contractive armouring to the outside world, stop it from coming in. And our fascia can also create a physical armour, stopping us from growing and expressing ourselves. And over time, part of what this becomes is this kind of tight, restrictive movement, because we're storing or packing some of these old toxic emotions deep into the tissues. So emotional maturity within the body is a means of integrating a wide spectrum of human emotions and feelings and allowing us to function independently. And by aligning ourselves with the truth of who we are and the ability to adapt to each moment in complete acceptance is the path of the Tao. So this is us being in absolute harmony with the world around us where possible. And it's not always an easy thing to achieve. It's not always a simple process to go through. And there are times when we can really get stuck with it. And it's one of the things that I really like about the LifeForce Qigong work, is that it just gives me a tool every time to be dealing with this, so that I'm not constricted, I'm not stuck, I'm not limited, because there are practices that help me transform. And time again, when I feel that stagnation in my system and I do my practices, there's that transformation that takes places. And so these places inside our body, these emotional charges, when they don't get digested, is in a way the same as like a toxic food that can go into our body, into our organs, into our connective tissue, our joints, our nervous system. And because every cell in our body is remembering everything, it imprints into our cellular memory and is this storehouse of lifetime imprints of things that we have. Our bodies don't forget, but we often choose not to remember. And when we suppress our emotional charges, these places in our body can become numb. And the main vehicle of our communication lies in our fascia and our connective tissue. And the principal mode of communication relies on contact and movement, because these are the places where our body has feedback, our exteroceptive systems, where we're actually perceiving what happens on the outside. So obviously sight and smell and hearing, but also our sense of touch. And then there's our interoceptive feelings as well, our inner rhythms, our movements, our gut feelings. And this mode of movement through our bodies is all the way from our breath moving into every tissue and every cell in our body. When we stop breathing into an area, we also stop feeling it, and again it can become numb. So if our body's storing something painful, difficult, uncomfortable in a particular area, then often we'll stop moving with that, because we kind of, again, any disturbance into that area can create a response and a reaction that we experience, that we are very kind of aware of. And so you may have experienced that during massage or fascia manipulation or body manipulation, that you've had a knot or a tension or a something that your therapist has identified, and they've worked on it, and it's been really uncomfortable, like more than you would ever believe, more than you were actually aware of feeling. And then, after they've kind of worked through it, we can often have this release of spontaneous emotion. And that might be anything from tears to frustration, irritation, to a depression or a low mood. And this is just that process coming out of that tissue. And that area has just been holding all of that emotion through stagnation. And we can go through life with a whole bunch of unnoticed muscular contractions and tensions within the body. And it takes a lot of life energy and a lot of time to keep ourselves out of balance. But for some reason we have this idea that it's easier to endure the physical pain on a physical level than having to experience it on an emotional level. And we tend to build up all these layers of protection around it. And these layers have their own kind of information in there that says don't go near this. And it seems that over time these get bigger and bigger and bigger, and we don't want to go near a thing. But often when we do process the emotion and deal with it, it's a lot less than we thought it was, because generally, it's no longer present. It's something that was in the past for us. And so it doesn't have quite the same relevance, even though there's this big warning flag over it. And second, that change of how we're feeling afterwards is often a great relief. And we often feel significantly better for that. So the areas of the body that often get most contracted and having all effect all the way through to the bones, into the marrow, often stagnating our blood and our energy, are places like the jaws, the spine, the hips, the shoulders, the neck, soles of the feet, palms of the hands. And dumped emotional charges haunt the places they are held and affect us a little bit like a parasite. And the symptoms that we get around these are usually messages from within, asking for assistance, requiring attention, wanting us to make some kind of change or acknowledgement. And most of the pain can come from healthy reaction to unhealthy situations. Because it's okay for us to respond to things, but we also have to recognise that a lot of the situations we see in life around us are actually quite unhealthy. They're quite difficult spaces. And healing is about fulfilling our life purpose and involves being in harmony with the evolution of our time. And we enter into these life situations that are foreign to our nature and unbalancing to our spirit, and they can sometimes create rebellion in our bodies as well. And a lot of the time our conscious mind is oblivious to the situation, and only when the symptoms become too great for our bodies to cope do we look for healing. The healing process itself is a physical and mental manifestation of the internal conflict between the parts of us that want to evolve and grow and the part of us that is afraid of going through the pain of change and growth. And that's something that we see so often, and something that so often leads to what we call horizontal development as well, where we're great at kind of doing a lot of stuff but all on the same level, rather than actually going through the really difficult stuff and making healthy growth. Healthy growth. Wow, my tongue is twisting today. It's really interesting. And there's no real final emotional release in life. When we release emotionality as there's an energetic charge that's moving and changing place and transforming into other forms. So it's not like something is just gone. And especially when we're working with the Qigong, we're looking to transform this into useful, beneficial energy as well. And when we're able to move old residual tensions and stagnations, the energy that's spent holding a pathology in place turns into a healing surge of energy, dissolving that stagnation, potentially reversing the effects of the dis-ease with the negative charge turning into a useful and beneficial one. So the heart itself is an energy as well. There are some very kind of specific qualities that we can consider within the heart. So this is fire element, and fire is the warmth that gives birth to all life. It's the creative expression of the universe at its peak, burning brightly as the core of the sun. It has the power to transmute and transform, to burn away the old, to make way for the new. It's the excitement and the joy that birthed in every moment into love, into passion, into enthusiasm. Fire is the power of communication and creativity, of movement and dance, to bring us together and to feel and to express our purpose with confidence. So within Chinese 5-element theory as well, the fire element is looked at as a life-giving center. So the heart is that life-giving space within the body, and the sun, and it can be likened to a controlling influence of an emperor who sits at the heart of the nation. And in balance, the fire element gently supports life as a hearth warms the home. And within any given individual, the fire element can be present in either an excessive or a deficient manner. So in its excessive nature, like the sun can scorch or parch the earth, similarly individuals with excess fire may appear to be overly hot, their struggle for survival manifesting as excess need for control in all aspects of being. And heat in its nature accelerates processes and causes expansion. So excessive fire may contribute to the acceleration of any physiological process, which may manifest as quickened pulse, eating too quickly, or any process that is proceeding at a faster than healthy rate. Any heat trapped in the heart may be the physiological correlate of unexpressed desire as well. In an attempt to dissipate the heat, the heart may overwork, contributing towards high blood pressure, excessive heart rate. And the heart and the circulatory system and the heart protector, the pericardium, so expanded may lead to burnout in the form of heart attack or stroke. Expansiveness may also present as a lack of boundaries in relationship, as the fire element burns those significant others when boundaries are crossed inappropriately. And if the sun doesn't shine for any prolonged period of time, cold and dampness can characterize the landscape. And if the fire element is deficient within, then cold predominates as physiological processes begin to slow and contract. And this can come out as overly slow pulses, poor digestion, reflecting in the inability of the stomach to cook the food. And as it's the fire element that then leads into the earth element in the Sheng cycle, in the growth cycle within 5 elements, if there's inappropriate heat in the body, then we can't digest. We can also have slowness of thought. And contraction may present as an inability to maintain relationships, as personal fire is withdrawn in an attempt to protect the self from the pain of disappointment. So joy is the main emotion that's associated with the fire element. And the character Li, which is the representation in Chinese of joy, has the meaning of both music and joy, which are often discussed together in old Confucian aspects. And according to Confucius, the purpose of ritual and music is to permit human desire and emotion to be expressed in a healthy fashion without excess. And the presence of the emotion joy immediately engenders its opposite, which is lack of joy or sorrow. So Confucius's commentary on the form for fire is cited at the head of any section about moving away as well, because there's this sense of pulling away from joy. The struggle to maintain or the inability to express joy are key emotive states that drive people who are fire constitutions as well. And habitual reaction to the emotions of joy or sorrow leads them away from the virtue of proprietary towards life themes centered around an excessive need for either control or for chaos. Reaction to past sorrow may lead them to keep their hearts habitually closed in an attempt to avoid disappointment and pain. And in this case, individuals may appear as joyless tyrants who struggle for control in all domains of life. A general principle of physics is that the more tightly an atom is confined, the more it vibrates and thus generates heat. Similarly, the tighter the heart is held as they attempt to maintain control, the more heat and pressure are generated as the heart fails to express its purpose. And in this scenario, yin and jing are consumed as the heart fire rages. A habitual reaction to sadness may also lead to an excessive quest for joy, and this may manifest as the tendency to cling to whatever creates feelings of happiness, and here they evidence a lack of self-control, ultimately exhausting their store of heart qi in the hedonistic pursuit of pleasure. Chaos ensues as the patient's heart fails to provide a stable centre capable of accessing the potential wisdom stored within the jing, within that physical essence. So the spirit of the fire element is the heart shen, is actually the heart's spirit itself, which itself is the basis of the spirit residing in each of the other yin officials. So the heart is considered this emperor, this kind of over-governor of a sense of the other organs within the system. And the quality of brightness in the eyes is evidence of the heart spirit radiating into the world. Now there's an irony at the heart of the fire element, is that true control comes from doing nothing. And this is found in the Chinese concept of wu wei, or inaction. And apparently for a long time the emperor of China had a sign over his throne that bear the characters of wu wei, as a reminder that the best course of action to aid life by encouraging it to unfold on its own, so to do nothing. And a habitual reaction to the emotions of joy and sadness drives the fire officials to maintain either excessive or deficient levels of control in the exercise of their respective functions. Thus, the heart of fire types is ultimately unfulfilled, as each new relationship is only momentarily satisfying before they are compelled to a new level of either dominance. The healthy experience of intimacy with others is based on knowing what lies in our own heart, and ultimately the organ functions that contribute to our experience of intimacy are paramount to the integrity of each human being. The officials associated with the fire element are of particular importance in regulating the appropriate function of intimacy in human beings. And one of the key functions of the fire officials is to define and mediate the functioning of several levels of boundary between our true self, our heart, and the outside world. Within the fire element, within Chinese medicine as well, we've actually got 4 aspects that are considered as the officials in there. So we have the heart and the small intestine, which are paired yin and yang organs respectively, and then we also have the pericardium, or the heart protector, also sometimes referred to as circulation sacs, and the triple warmer, again yin and yang respectively. And a quote from the Nijing Suwen: "The heart holds the office of Lord and Sovereign. The radiance of the spirits stems from it." In the inner tradition of Chinese medicine, the circulation of qi amongst the 12 meridians begins with the heart. This reflects an orientation that ultimately seeks to help people access the insight empowered by their own hearts. In terms of personal boundary, the heart is both the origin of the capacity for connection as well as the ultimate goal of connection. And the main function of the heart as sovereign is to acknowledge momentary reality as it occurs, unimpeded by the mind's interpretation of events. And this is very much where our interoceptive system, our feeling sense, is giving us that instant feedback moment to moment. What are we contracting around? What are we expanding around? What makes us feel heavy? What makes us feel light? And it's our kind of practice, as it were, to start following that as much as we can and connect into that as much as we can. So the main function of the heart as a sovereign is to acknowledge momentary reality as it occurs, unimpeded by the mind's interpretation of events. And a well-functioning heart empowers us to respond freely and spontaneously to each new situation in life. Hence, the sage accepts each new situation as heaven's attempt to cultivate the seed it planted within him at the moment of conception. Internally, the heart allows us to acknowledge our true nature as stored in the yuan qi, our original essences, and in the jing. In this way, the heart provides the capacity to be intimate with oneself. And how many of us really struggle to know ourselves, to be at peace and at harmony with our own emotions, our own bodies, our own minds, our own sense of self. And all illnesses may be considered indicative of having lost touch with the truth in one's heart of hearts. The heart is the foundational function of the fire element, and the irony which lies thematically at the centre of the heart constitution is that which is true for all of the fire-based element, that true control comes from doing nothing. The habituated mind, in its attempt to create a condition of safety for the heart, struggles unceasingly to either maintain or abdicate control in life. In so doing, it either overly constrains or fails to focus the heart in a way that prevents it from ever connecting to true self. Hence, as long as the mind dictates our course of action, the heart remains unfulfilled. And the irony is that only in surrender of the mind can the heart re-establish its authority and again govern through its innate wisdom. The heart as emperor lives well protected in the centre of the nation. No injury must come to the heart, and as long as the heart's function is intact, there is always hope of healing. The heart is so important that it's the only official with 3 other functions to protect it. That, as I've mentioned, about the small intestine, heart protector or pericardium, and the triple warmer, and how they establish boundary and protection of the heart and help with the appropriate function of intimacy within human beings. Now, within the fire element, we've talked about the heart and small intestine, but there are a lot of associations as well within Chinese medicine. So the sense organ, so the external expression of the heart, is found within the tongue. The tissues are considered the blood vessels, which would make sense because of the nature of the heart within blood. The taste that is there to support the fire element is a pungent taste. Colour of red. Emotions: love, joy, happiness, arrogance, hatred, jealousy. Sweat is the fluid of the fire element. And the stress response is to fall apart. The behaviour can be lying. Season of summer, which we're just beautifully moving into now. The direction is to the south. Bodily system of circulation. And the time of day specifically for the heart really runs, because when we look at the horary cycle, when we look at the meridian clock, the sun following in these 2-hour blocks that meridians work through, and if we use Greenwich Mean Time as our basis for it, the heart is most active between 11 a.m. and 1 p.m, but the fire element itself runs from 11 until 3, with the small intestine taking up its kind of surging process between 1 p.m. and 3 p.m. But we also have a second bout of fire energy at 7 p.m. when the pericardium, the heart protector meridian, surges, and then again at 9 p.m. when the triple warmer surges for its 2 hours. And we have to remember that at this time of year in the UK here, we're now in British summertime, so we actually make a conversion of that. So 11 till 1 p.m., 11 a.m. till 1 p.m. will actually become 12 p.m. to 2 p.m. So we just move it forward an hour to balance that out for us as well. So part of what's really exciting about being able to use these LifeForce Qigong practices is that we actually get a sense of transformation in the heart. So as I said earlier on, the first part of the day is always working with the physical tissues, actually experiencing what the physical tissue around the heart is like. And one of my Bowen technique teachers has often talked about How do we find the end of the shoulders and the beginning of the neck? Where does that fascia and the muscle and the connective tissue really end for one and begin for the other? So we can have this theme of continuity, that all of the connective tissue around the chest, and that's both the front and the back side of the thoracic area within the body, the upper part of the body, that's all interrelated around the heart. And if we think about our kinesiology interpretation of this, the subscapularis muscle, the muscle that's behind the scapula, is the one that's indicated for the heart meridian and the heart energies. So any of these movements through the arms, because when we test the subscapularis, it's about this rotational function of the upper arm, and whenever we test those muscles, we're testing right deep into the chest. So all of our physical practices are helping to loosen up and opening the chest. So this has the benefit of helping with the breathing as well, that as we can breathe better, not only can we take in better fresh chi, but we can release old stagnant energies. And we're creating space around the heart as we loosen the shoulders, loosen the neck, helping everything function in the chest more easily. And as I spoke earlier about that cooling function of the lungs for the heart, so we don't become overly hot-headed, so as we release and free up those tissues around the lungs, we're also helping to create that better, more efficient cooling for the tissues of the heart. And in the second part of the practices that we do within this 5-element day here at the Centre for Integral Health in Shrewsbury in England, we're going more into the subtle energy. So we're using processes that are softer, more gentle, more subtle, and it's less about the physical movement, but more about the connection into the heart as an energy. And within the work that my brother Simon has created within LifeForce Qigong, he's come up with this masterful pattern of processes where we go through 5 stages with each of the elements. And we begin first of all by assuming a standing posture that actually helps to connect us into the quality of the element. So the fire element is very much about burning up and out, and it's an expansive and hot kind of sensation within the body, very present, very alert, very here. And once we can connect into that quality, we can then start to loosen and activate the tissues around the heart, so that before we're trying to change anything, we're actually softening those tissues, we're helping to change things, so that we're not trying to clear the dirt out of a sealed room. So it's like opening the doors and the windows, preparing to let things move. And once we've kind of loosened and activated the tissues, we're then able to move into flushing and cleansing. And within this, we've got both movement and we have sound. So each of the 5-element organs has got a sound that can be used for purging. And the heart itself, the sound is So that's a little bit like the word hawthorn, but we're only using that first syllable there and extending the W's out at the end. And quite an interesting experiment to do for yourself, just to give you an idea of how these sounds can be used to create transformation, is if you just put your hand in front of your mouth and gently blow on it, you should find that the air that you're blowing out is relatively cool. Now, if you keep that hand in front of your mouth, take a really nice deep breath in, and then make the sound haw. And what you might find is that air is coming out of your lungs is much hotter. So this is part of what these purging sounds doing, is they're helping to cleanse the excess heat, the stagnant sick energy that's stuck within the organ. So they're really useful and can be done as a standalone practice as well. And that's something that you can actually find in the resources section on my website. You can go in there and sign yourself up, and you'll find that there are the healing sounds practices in there. So you can actually go through all of the 5 elements, plus we do a 6th one as well to clear through the triple warmer. And you can find those 5 element sounds that can be done as a standalone practice for themselves, and that's really useful. But even better when it's incorporated into this whole sequence of 5 element movements. So once we've loosened and activated and flushed and cleansed, we can actually start to circulate and direct energy. So we're making sure that before we try and push any energy around the body, we've made space first of all. And then we can actually start to relay the track, relay the road that the fire element energy, that the heart element energy is going down through, so that we're deepening and clarifying those furrows so that the energy flows more strongly and more evenly through that. And then once we've circulated and directed, that's the time that we then enhance and energize. So we'll take in more fresh chi to build into this system that we've loosened and cleared and directed, so that it's all moving in the right way, in the right direction, at the right level. So we've got these beautiful processes, and then the final part of that is to integrate and regulate. Because we also don't want the heart to become excessive in any way, so we're making sure that we're allowing that energy to be properly integrated. Because also part of the Sheng cycle within 5 elements is that this energy from the heart is now going to move on into the earth element and feed the earth element, feed the spleen energy. And we don't want to create any kind of disturbance to that in a way that could trigger an excess of worry within the system or lead to an overactive system. So we always complete the 5 element sequences by regulating and integrating the elements so that it's in a nice stable space. But it's kind of like having cleared the room and refreshed it. We're not leaving anything to spill out anywhere else in a way that will cause any problems for it. So these are beautiful processes that we undertake within the 5 element work. And once we've kind of been through all of this process, we can smile into it and help to build that energy up in it. And we can also do a kind of mindfulness and self-reflective practice at this point as well, and actually have a look at what it is that's coming up for us. You know, what it is that we're finding within ourselves as we're doing these practices. You know, is there anything that comes out? And there's the possibility of all sorts of old store and stagnant emotional processes to come out both during the physical practices, the Jing practices, and during the more subtle Qi practices as well. And this is something that we should just be aware of, and it can take anything from a few hours to a few days, sometimes even a few weeks for those emotions to find their way through and to really move through. And one of the best things we can do to help that is to continue to do the practices. And again, this is something that I've found with the LifeForce Qigong work, that as we do these practices, that anything that is coming up and is uncomfortable, if we actually, you know, if it feels appropriate to do so, if we gently work the practices, they will continue to help that processing take place. And of course, we've got to remember the 70% rule that Simon teaches us for these practices, that we should never go beyond an edge that feels appropriate for us. That it's okay to come up to and just to feel the edge, but to actually go beyond it is probably something that we're best off avoiding. So I'm hoping that this has been a really interesting and a useful discussion on the energies of the fire element and how that can have an effect on your health and well-being, and ways that you can work with that. And if this has been of interest to you, you might want to come and join us for one of the LifeForce Qigong 5 element days that I hold here in the UK. And you can find details of that on my website, www.bencolder.co.uk, and there'll be a link for that in the details of discussion for this as well. So thanks for listening. Hope you've enjoyed it, and I'll look forward to coming back to you with another LifeForce Patterning Integral Health podcast soon. Take care, look after yourself, enjoy the summer, and love your heart.